Thank you for joining us today for the 2026 Project Manager, Skills, Tools, and Mindset for the Future. My name is Anabela Coria, and I'm a Senior Project Manager at Humentum. I'll be moderating today's session. Project management is a core skill across the development and humanitarian sector, but managing projects today is becoming more complex. Expectations are high, and teams are forced to adapt to fast-changing environments. So today, we're taking a step back to explore how can you stay effective as a project manager in 2026, and how is that role going to evolve? Before we dive in, a couple of quick notes. The first one, this session is being recorded and we'll share the recording with you via email. We will send this as a follow-up email. And the second one, please feel free to drop your questions in the chat at any time. We'll come back to them during the Q&A section at the end of the session. With that, I'm very pleased to introduce our speakers. First, we have Edson Marinho, Executive Director of PM for NGOs. Edson is a project and program management specialist with over 20 years of experience. He has been leading PM for NGOs since 2015 and has played a key role in developing and delivering the Project Management for Development Professionals Project DPRO certification globally. He is also a strong advocate for making project management tools accessible and practical for organizations working directly with communities. We're also joined by our associate consultant, Amanda Fleetwood. Amanda has over 15 years of experience in global development, with expertise in project management, monitoring and evaluation, and proposal development. She has also been closely involved in the redevelopment of our Project DPRO training and brings a very practical, hands-on approach to training and capacity building. Welcome to you both. It's great to have you here. I'll guide the conversation with a few questions to get us started, and then we'll open up for questions later from the participants. Feel free to drop your questions in the chat as we go so that we can catch those questions later. Let's start. Edson, Amanda, how is project management evolving in the development sector? What are you seeing change in terms of what's expected from project managers today compared to what it was a few years ago? Amanda?
So that's a really great question to start us off with. I think there's a few things that have been changing and evolving over the last 3, 5, 10 years. One of the most obvious is the technology that's available. As we get more tools, as the technology advances, then we have more opportunities to streamline our projects, to improve collaboration. I think at this point there is the opportunity to collaborate with everybody across the globe. We have more access to people than we've ever had before. So if you're leading a project team from Europe or Africa, you can consult with people from the Middle East, Asia, Australia, the United States, Latin America, and you can do it in real time. So even 10 years ago, that was a bit more challenging. But in this day and age, with the technology available, we are able to have that kind of collaboration and streamlining. I think the other thing that has been really impactful is also the changing and evolving funding landscape. Now, this is something that we've seen trending over the past few years, but project managers are often asked to do more with fewer resources. And that can be really challenging. And that's been amplified in the past 2 years with a dramatic drop in funding and resources available globally. So I think those are two of the major things that have changed in the last 3 to 5 to 10 years. Edson, I don't know if you have anything to add to that.
Oh, absolutely. And I think you have a very, very, very good point. Technology has allowed us to learn from other project managers around the world, and it has made our work easier. But I think there is one thing that it hasn't changed, which is the need of using a best practice or methodology as foundation for what we do. So I think about 10 years ago, we didn't have the many tools and platforms that we can use for project management, for both the technical part, but also for the learning from other project managers. And it has changed. Now we have many, many platforms, but the platforms themselves, they are as good as the information we put there and what we share then and we learn from it. So yes, I mean, I think technology has changed a lot, but us as project managers, we have to keep our foundation. And look at the funding cuts. Yes, that's something that is also changing completely the environment, especially for organizations who like to search for training, specific project management training or knowledge, because most of the funds are now focused on the end beneficiary. So I would say that one thing that is challenging, we have all the information, but it's up to us to go look for it and not expect for training. We should try to at least have some of that fundamental training, but we can go deeper in those details as we move forward.
Thank you both. You have mentioned quite some characteristics, both for the project manager, but also what it has been happening in the sector and in the world. Building on that, what does a future-ready project manager actually looks like in 2026?
Oh, well, I mean, let me get exactly what I was talking about the platform. So think about a project manager 15 years ago. Everything was done in a paper, or mostly on paper, Excel spreadsheets, or Word documents. And nowadays you have platforms that connect teams, connect projects into programs, connect people, but still you need to use some base foundation and common language to access those platforms. And we look at this year and the past couple of years and what's coming next. I don't want to get into AI discussion. I don't want it's a rabbit hole. I mean, don't want to go there. But again, AI is coming. Many people are saying, "Oh, am I going to lose my job? Am I going to be replaced by AI?" No, you're not. AI, as all platforms that we've seen growing all those years, is going to be a tool. It's going to help us. It's going to make things a little faster. We can get bigger data and analyze that, but it will be as good as the information that you put there, as good as the methodology that you use to manage your project. So when you think about being ready for what's coming in terms of technology, I would say that you need actually to have some common language, some methodology to actually get the best from those tools.
And then building off of that, I think the word that comes to mind when I see future ready is adaptable, because we are living and working in contexts that are incredibly dynamic, that are changing constantly, and we have access to information. And that can be a blessing and a burden, right? So we want to make sure that we're able to filter and receive the information and get the information that we need to be able to inform our decision making. So the project manager needs to have that filter in place. Okay, what information do I need and when do I need it in order to be able to make decisions? And then being adaptable. So we don't want to be rigid, right? We can't be rigid. If our context change, we have to change with the context. We want to make sure that we're still doing the right projects in the right way.
Thank you. And I think that's the adaptability, especially in what we are living right now and what is coming in the future. That's one of the key areas. We often focus on skills, but you have also mentioned the methodologies and the best practices that make the difference in project management. So what are some structured approaches that really help project managers manage complexity, stay in control of what's possible, and how does the project Pro support that?
Well, I think the structured approach is the way that we are able to be adaptable and flexible. So they often sound competing, right? Like, oh, well, I can't be structured and then also be adaptable and flexible. But the reality is that if you don't have that structure, you won't know where you need to be flexible. You won't know where you need to be adaptable. It's going to be chaos, honestly. You're just going to be making decisions based on whims and maybe understandings in the current context. But if you have a structured approach that includes, okay, these are the processes, this is the common language that we have, and that common language has a lot of benefits. If you are all speaking the same language across your teams, it is going to increase your efficiency because you won't have to explain, oh, well, this is what I mean when I say risk register or risk assessment, or hey, this is what I mean when I say the project is well governed. You already know that. So, a structured approach creates an environment for the project to be more adaptable and flexible, and also creates the ability for the project to be resilient. It's because you know where you can make changes and adaptations because you have the whole process laid out and you have all the information at your fingertips. And the Project Pro is incredibly helpful at this. So, one of the things that I love most about this methodology is its adaptability. You can take it as it is, from start to finish as a complete methodology, or you can take the bits and pieces that you need and apply them to your projects. And so the Project Pro allows people to take exactly what they need out of it. And I think that is a benefit that we often don't see in a lot of structured and rigid methodologies.
I would like to get to the adaptability and the structure that you mentioned, Amanda. Just to share a story, when Project Pro came to Brazil back in 2011, I guess, and we finished our first course there. I remember that one of the organizations we work with, they said, "Oh, now we're ready to manage our project. We create this Excel spreadsheet that has all 34 tools from project manager, and now we just have to fill it out." No, that was a very simple project. It doesn't need all those tools. It had the log frame, issues log, risk management, communications plans, and so on. And so, no, you need to look what tools actually make sense for the complexity of the project that you have, for the context that you are working with. You don't have a committee in your project. You only have a single sponsor. You don't have a governance, plan that big and that comprehensive because it's one much simple governance in the project. So then we start learning and how Project Pro actually is adaptable and we can change it for the need of the project, for the need of your team. Another example is not all tools, even though the context requires it, not all tools you work with the same components that you need. There is one tool that I love. It's the issues log. I love the issues log. It helped me in one of my first projects because every time that I had to report the project, I had the financial part, I have the outputs, outcomes, everything was there, all the indicators, and then comes to the part that you have to write something about what have you learned this last quarter. So, okay, then I start thinking about it. So the issues log would be a very good tool, but my team didn't like it. I was not able to make it work at all. And I couldn't understand that. And I realized it was the name issues log. People don't like to report issues. So we change a little bit the tool, we change a little bit the components, we put some other details, and we change them for learning tool, and it worked. And that's like I said, man, that's what I like in Project Pro, because you can adapt, you can rename it, the name, call it as the way you want, as long as you use it. But remember that you need a common language to your whole team. So if you change anything, you have to share with everyone.
That's a great example. Thank you for sharing that. Just a quick reminder, if you have any questions, please put them in the chat. We will get to the questions in the Q&A section. And building on that, you both have mentioned how the Project Pro serves to be aligned, to have like tools and a framework that the whole organization can follow. One of the challenges that we hear a lot is keeping the teams aligned during implementation, specifically across partners and changing contexts. So what actually helps teams stay aligned?
I
Well, I can start. I
Go
can
ahead.
start.
Go ahead, Edson. Yeah, go
So,
ahead.
well, extend align would be understanding so everybody's on the same page. You have the same, align expectations to what is possible, what's not possible, what has been planned with the project. And like we've been saying, Amanda and I, we it's a common language. So everybody knows exactly what you mean when you talk about log frame, when you talk about risks, indicators, issues log, communications plan. You know exactly what you expect to look at that too and what that would work. We need, of course, amazing communications. However, we work in a world that has multiple donors, multiple communities, multiple partners. So how can we work with those, components and definitions if the donor sometimes they said, "Oh, I want you to use that specific log frame structure for your project. I want you to use that specific reporting template for your project." So what I would say is you can get from project to pro a standard used globally you can adapt for your organization and make that your common language. And every time that you have a different donor or to have to report to a different partner, you can translate or let's say adapt that terminology so the other organization or the donor would understand. But within your organization and your partners, it's really, really important that you be aligned not only on the common language, but also again back to expectations, plans and everything is being shared and well communicated across everyone. I don't know if I was in the same direction that you were, Amanda.
It was similar, but one thing that I wanted to bring in, so we have the Project Pro processes and tools, right? We have a phase model, and within each of those phases, there are a set of processes and tools that you need to follow. And that really is all about the what you need to do. There's another component that really focuses on the how, and that's the principles. The principles frame how you should approach everything that you do in projects. And one of the principles is participatory. And so when we talk about the implementation phase, when people come to me and say, okay, we're having a lot of challenges, partners don't know what they're doing, they aren't sure what's going on, the first thing I say, okay, well, what was their level of involvement in identifying and designing the project and setting it up? And then I usually get, some sort of, well, we sent them the work plan and the participatory principle and the stakeholder assessment and engagement from the very earliest phases of a project are a critical component in how smoothly things will go when you get to planning, implementation, and closure. And so I think one of the challenges that we need to keep in mind is it's not just about doing the tools. It's also about making sure that the right people are at the table at the right time throughout the process and using the principles to frame how we approach everything that we do in project management can be incredibly beneficial.
We're talking here about the participatory principle and how this can help us the teams stay aligned. But if we talk a little bit about the accountability side, how do you ensure these projects stay on track and deliver results even when things don't go as planned, as we all project managers know?
I've never had a project that didn't have changes. In fact, I am very wary of projects that come across my desk that don't have any changes. So you're very good at predicting the future. Um, so the reality is that we should expect some sort of change. It might be minor, but there's not any real way to predict how the future is going to go. In some cases, we can't predict what's going to happen next week, let alone in 1 or 2 years. And so I think that's something really important to keep in mind is that it's not just about uh, making sure that things go as planned. Is that plan still relevant to what's happening on the ground? And this is, again, where some of those principles come in and also where monitoring and evaluation come in. And all of these together help us to remain accountable. It's really important to think about accountability in a multitude of ways, okay? So we're not just being accountable to the donors, right? We got to be accountable to all stakeholders. And so keeping our projects relevant and making sure that they reflect the reality on the ground is one of the ways to be accountable. Another way to be accountable is ensuring that we're documenting things. My favorite saying is, if it's not documented, it wasn't done. And so that's something to be mindful of. If you if you document everything, if everything is clearly articulated throughout the project, then you are preserving the memory of that project and being accountable to the different stakeholders.
Oh, this is being recorded. Oh my God, I can't believe I'm going to say that, but things will not go as planned. Like you said, Amanda, if there is a project that was planned and on day one, it's the same plan used after a year or two, something's wrong. Projects will change. And the way that we're going to be accountable is actually learning from those changes, adapting our project, and make sure that's relevant, like you said, Amanda. And I like that you said about accountability being, multiple levels and different levels. When you talk about monitoring and evaluation, I think we had, Amanda, a conversation some years ago about that if monitoring and evaluation are tools or processes only to inform and to be accountable for the donor, they will look beautiful because you want to show to the donor that you actually reached all the indicators, all the goals. No, monitoring and evaluation are tools for the project. So you will certainly will need to add indicators that the donor has asked you to monitor, but you need indicators for your team to make sure that you still doing the right project. And most important, to also be accountable to the beneficiaries. So we assume that the community knows how we are progressing with the project, but it's not necessarily true. We need to have evaluation reports and evaluation communications and monitoring reports to the community to be accountable for the donors, for your team, for your organization, and for your beneficiaries as well. So this is, I think, and regarding the last piece that you said about having everything documented, this is so important for thinking about long term. And you finish this project, and a few years later, you want to apply for a new project. Where is the documentation of your success? What you can show that has been done in your project and created change in that community. If you don't document that, you won't have that information. As well, you won't have the learning. So if you don't learn how you have to adapt your project, what were the issues? What kind of change you had to make? How can you be prepared for this new project? So I think those 2 points are really, really important, like I said, Amanda.
You both are mentioning this process of documentation and this helping prepare the project manager for any changes that will most likely happen. So often when projects become reactive, like what other tools or what other things can help project managers anticipate these risks earlier? Because I know we cannot predict what is happening, especially with many things in the world. We cannot predict it for sure what's happening tomorrow. So how can we, as project managers, prepare for risk earlier or stay ahead of some of these problems?
Annabella, you use the right terms. I mean, issues are happening right now and risks are in the future. And well, first of all, as a project manager, we will always be dealing with both risks, so we have to be prepared for those, and issues. So you'll always be facing, because the context changed, because everything changed. So the project must react, and the project team must react and change and adapt for whatever is happening. So I remember Amanda mentioned about participatory. So have a comprehensive and participatory risk assessment. Who knows better what could happen with a project in the ground, in the community, other than the community itself, other than people working there? Create a plan to respond to those risks and allocate funds, because I've seen very beautiful risk plans that has no funding at all. So the risk happens and we don't have the money, to react to that and to put the plan in place. And also assess what kind of change that brings to the project if that issue happens. Quick example, you think about COVID, how it impacted. First of all, it wasn't a risk. Nobody before COVID could anticipate that everything in the whole world would just stop being possible to be done in person. So we had to react to that as an issue. And also, we need funding to change everything to online, to teach people how to do that online or remotely. Amanda, remember you mentioned that a lot from the projects that you led and you trained in the Middle East, and how challenging that was, because there was even the infrastructure for remote management. So yes, projects must react, but not in in the sense of reacting and it's reacting for adapt and for change. And of course, being participatory is the best way to anticipate those.
I love the participatory risk assessment part. I think that is one of the critical things that can improve your risk and your responses. Um, One thing that I like to just reiterate is you want to create a resilient project, and you have to be honest and forthcoming with what the risks are. Sometimes I've worked with quite a few organizations across the globe, and what I often see is a resistance to risk. And I've dug deeper and tried to figure out, okay, well, why is there this resistance to risk? And it's not necessarily a resistance to risk, but it's a resistance to making the risk available to others. So letting the donor know that there are potentially things that could go wrong. Well, won't that make us look bad in front of the donor? No, quite the contrary. When you have a solid risk assessment with clear response strategies, with a clear ownership, it doesn't show that you could possibly fail. What it shows is that you're proactively thinking about what could happen that could compromise your project's ability to deliver successfully. And so I think creating this resilient project environment and creating, I guess, a risk, a proactive risk environment requires that we're really honest about why we're doing this. We're not doing this because it is a step in the process. We're doing this to create a more resilient project. And part of the accountability from the last question is making sure that stakeholders know what could potentially go wrong so that when and if it does go wrong, you have something ready to go. So I think risk is really something that we should focus more on, especially in this sector, because inherently we're working in risky environments. There were times in some of my projects where we were revisiting the risk register every 3 days because the context was changing so much. It was a conflict environment, things were changing frequently, and so we were revisiting it every 3 days. It was a little bit exhausting, but at the same time, we were staying on top of things and we were able to inform different stakeholders, hey, guess what? This is what's happening. Here are the new risks that we've uncovered. We'll keep you updated if they actually happen, if they turn into issues. So it does create more resilience, it creates more accountability, and it's something we should be doing more of in this sector.
Thank you. I think
One
this.
thing that
Sorry, Edson. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm sorry. One thing I just would like to add is something that you said, Amanda, that there is some resistance sometimes to expose ourselves of the potential risk, especially for the donor. And like you said, actually donors prefer that you have a very good, risk plan, well assessed with ownership, that they know what could go wrong. So that's the point. They would prefer that you say, well, this could happen, than come in with a surprise after 1 year the project is being developed, say, well, we can't move forward because there is this problem now. And the first question they would ask us is, didn't you know that when we start the project that would be possible? So sharing with them is actually help us to also change the project or adapt the project when that risk happens, because many of the donors' policies prevent us to change or to adapt the project. So it's in their policy that funds cannot be relocated or activities cannot be changed. But if you share the risks up front, they will appreciate and it will actually help your work, because it's going to be there that if that specific risk becomes an issue, there will be an exception for those policies or for those, control mechanisms that the donor has. And they will be happy as well, not with the issue, of course, but that we are prepared for it.
From what I'm hearing from both of you, is that again the importance of like the right setup for making sure that you have your monitoring tools so that you can also continue, and as Amanda was saying, as often as is needed, depending on the context, on the project, on the project that you're working on. We are touching already a little bit on this, but on all the unpredictable environments we're operating in right now and all of these organizations. What advice will you give project managers in terms of mindset? What helps them stay effective?
Oh, so this is a bit challenging, and it's really easy to get disheartened when things don't go as you envision. Of course, the structured approach is going to help. Okay, it's going to help with that resiliency. As far as mindset, um, we would all love to have adequate budget for our projects. We would all love to have more time. We would all love to have uh, funding for a comprehensive needs assessment, right? We would love to have all these things, but oftentimes they're just not possible. And so, one of the best pieces of advice I can give you is you have to work within the constraints that exist. If you try to work against them, you will just continue to beat your head against the table, and it's not going to do anybody any good. Take what you have, understand the constraints that exist, and then work within that. Okay, there's no point in trying to work outside of what you can do. Do what is ever in your control and use a structured approach where possible. Use the tools, use the processes, involve people, use the principles as your approach, and try to remain as adaptable and flexible as possible.
Oh, good God. Where to start? I mean, yes, this is the mindset for the project manager. I would like to go in a different direction. And Amanda, you are absolutely right. We need to work with our constraints. We need to work with what we have in hands. But how do I know exactly how to do that? And how do I know what I have in hand? So we need to be constantly learning and exploring and testing new tools and adapting whatever. The techniques, the principles we use should be the foundation, but we are also always adapting and learning. If you look at you as individual and you are looking, for example, to search for a new job, or if you are looking at your organization and you're looking for apply for new funding, having some training course like what the Humentum offers, having a certification like the Project Pro, it is going to help you. But it's not just that. Like Amanda said, you need to be working what you have. So your mindset must be work what you have if you are in a project already, continue learning, ask for help, be humble. I mean, ask for colleagues, ask for your team to help you to understand what's happening, ask in the community to understand what's happening, and ask for help for the donor as well. I think that's a good overall. If you're looking as a professional for a job, let's say, you would have to be competing with many other professionals. And nowadays, well, I don't want to go again in the AI, but nowadays, if you apply for a job, if your organization apply for funding, maybe some of the triggers that would say if you can go further or not on that process would be if you have your team trained or if you have your team certified. So that's something that you also have to keep in mind because you maybe even have your idea read by someone because you don't have the triggers that would be preventing you to go there.
Thank you both for this. This is very insightful and some good recommendations for all the project managers that are here with us today. We're going to now transition to the Q&A section because we have some very good questions in the chat. I will start with this one that I think is probably being asked by many people that have already done some other certifications in project management. So in terms of tools, approaches, and techniques, what is the major difference between the DBRO, for example, PMP from the Project Management Institute? Edson?
Okay, so well, first of all, there is no better or worse methodology. You have PMP, you have Project Pro, you have Prince2, you also have different agile methodologies. I don't think there is any better or worse. The same way that Project Pro can be adapted for specific contexts, there are different methodologies for different contexts. And we always say that Project Pro is the most appropriated methodology for the development projects, for social good projects. But let me just give an example that came to me once when I have a conversation. Let me go to an organization, Habitat for Humanity, build houses for communities. And is Project Pro enough for those projects? Well, it is really important because you have to assess the need and manage the project with the community, looking at the actual needs they have. But the moment that someone starts building their house, maybe a different methodology would be more appropriate. And the same way, you might have a project on technology that is to address a community need. And when you think about technology and information technology, the first thing that comes to your mind is agile. And yes, to develop a new software, a new platform, a new application, you need agile. What about how you're going to assess the need of that community that you would develop that application for? So you might need Project Pro. So it's not fair to compare two methodologies, PMP and Project Pro. It's more important if you bring an example of a context and a need of a project, maybe you have to pick a piece of different ones. But for the development projects, I would say that Project Pro is the most appropriate one with those observations and examples that I have.
I think also the focus of the stakeholder involvement and things like monitoring and evaluation and intervention logics are pretty unique to the Project Pro. And for development and humanitarian projects, those are pretty foundational things that you need to have. And so I think that focus can be advantageous for projects that are focused in the development humanitarian sectors. Yeah.
Thank you both for that clarification. We have another question here in terms of using the participatory tools that we mentioned in this session. Some donors still have strict grant conditions where everything is planned and only implementation organizations are asked to act. Sorry. How can the implementing partners align the participatory model by involving the community, design a project that truly addresses their collective challenges, and monitor and evaluate the project?
So I want to frame this question by saying that participation doesn't happen spontaneously. It has to be a very intentional process. And if it's not included as part of your scope of work in your planning, then it's probably not going to happen. And this is the case because oftentimes participation of stakeholder groups involves more time. It can sometimes involve more resources. And so if you want to take that participatory approach, if you want to include more participatory tools, then you have to plan for it from the beginning. So you have to let the donor know, hey, this is what we're going to do. This is why we want to do it. This is why it's important. And this is the implications as far as time, budget, and resources. And when you do that, I feel that they're more receptive to that rather than just saying after the fact, hey, we want participation of stakeholders, but now we don't have the time, money, or resources to be able to do it. So it's a very intentional process that needs to be planned from the beginning. You need to include it in your proposal. So you need to be thinking about that from the identification and definition.
And I like that when everything is ready, then you bring the community together and say, hey, let's participate now. Everything is already planned and set up. We want your participation, which means just putting people together to just have listen to them, but not actually being part of the planning and the implementation. Well, participatory means that we need resources, including time. So when you do anything with participatory, you will need more time to plan and implement your project. And most likely it will be more successful. So there is a cost, but there is also a benefit on having more chances to be successful because you have everybody involved from the very beginning. And being participatory also doesn't mean that every single person will be involved. You have like community representations or different kids will be consulted, women, youth, elders. So you have different participation on those groups. You cannot bring everyone into a room. Let me give you one example. Many years ago, I managed a project that was to try to reduce the child labor in the countryside of Brazil, in the Minas Gerais state. And it was funded by Telefônica Foundation, was part of the Marinho program. And they came to us and said, oh, we want to implement that in 10 different cities in Minas Gerais. I said, all right, here's the matter. Whoa. How do we know that we can actually find that need in our community? We assume that, We assume there is child labor in all cities, and most probably there is. But which ones are actually now focusing on reducing the labor? There are conditions for implementing such project. So even before, so they funded, which is really rare, but it's possible. They funded the identification and definition phase. Amanda, this is one of these cases in 100,000 that the donor said, let's not fund the project. Don't give me the concept note yet. Let's go back one step and go to the identification definition and actually assess the communities and look if the need is really there. And among the hundreds of thousands small communities, we selected 10, and yes, the project went through. So, but it was way more well received and participatory than it would be if you just come to the municipality and say, "Here's a project, let's participate."
Well, yeah.
Thank you both. I think these are good examples as well, and it's very important that you clarify about the participatory, that it doesn't just happen, and you need to plan for it and you need to work for it, because also it might be that the other stakeholders are not as into the project at the beginning, and you will have to work through that relationship with them. I found another very interesting question here from a case that might have happened to many project managers. How do you approach taking over a project already in implementation when tools were not established and decisions were not properly logged? So how do you successfully bring that project to a closure?
Not an easy question for this one, but I lived something similar. Well, first of all, what comes first, the egg or the chicken? So many projects, they only have the ability to hire the project manager after the project has been already approved and funded. So many project managers might be in that situation. You are hired as a project manager, but you find everything is already there. And sometimes worse, it is there, but nobody was consulted in the communities for that project to be implemented. There was some, secondary data assessment, but not actually an assessment to the community. So how do we do that? There is no recipe that I know of, but I would say that you need to actually get to the community and try to identify and validate those needs and validate the risks, to validate the planning, the timeline, the budgeting, as at the same time that you get familiar with your project that you just received. But you definitely need to bring that to the community, not as an imposition, but as something that has been designed and they want now to adapt. Or maybe it is 99% correct, but to make sure that you are doing not the project right, but you're doing the right project. Like Amanda said, you might have a beautiful project with all the good intentions, but that's not an actual need of the community or priority for that community. So unfortunately, you will have to look at your budget and see how you can actually implement an identification and definition phase within the planning phase.
All great points there, Edson. And I would just add, I know I worked on some projects where I came in and there was nothing. It was just a whole bunch of nothing. I had a proposal and a contract, and that is about it. Uh, that can be a really challenging situation. And what you don't want to do is you don't want to spend all of your time, your implementation time, recreating tools. So there's a few different ways that you can approach it. One way would be to ask the donor for a little bit of time to get up to speed. And another one is just to start gradually putting things together. So if you don't have anything, okay, hey, everybody, hey, team, we got to get together and let's take a look at this implementation plan. Let's see if it's still valid. Let's see if it's still relevant. Okay, who are the stakeholders? So you start gradually putting the pieces back together retroactively, rather than starting from zero and trying to do the identification and definition and setup phases in 3 weeks. So I would say if you're starting from zero, just try to gradually, incrementally get the information together and put your tools together. Try to use the minimum number of tools possible, so that you're not overwhelmed, and yeah, just do what you can given the information that's available. That can be an incredibly challenging situation, but you don't want to make it worse by overwhelming yourself and the team by starting from ID&D and then trying to do it all in a very short period of time.
Thank you both for sharing your experiences. I think some project managers, when they face this, it's like, where do I go now? Like this, I just received this project, so what do I do with this? We have another question here. What are the best tools and tasks to make sure a project team is updated on progress and holding each other accountable? And Melissa shared here that often running today show people not documenting, but also not attending meetings to share updates, and then they can keep accountable of the tasks they committed to completing. So she wants to hear some of the how other project managers and in your expertise, Amanda, Edson, have been successful with this.
I don't know about you, Edson, but I think the RASI matrix would be great here.
Yeah,
Um,
I love it.
Yeah, so that's a roles and responsibility matrix that basically outlines who's doing the work, who's accountable for it, who needs to be consulted, and who needs to be informed. So that is a spectacular tool to use when it comes to ensuring accountability. So I would definitely recommend checking that out. I don't know, Edson, do you have any other thoughts on other
No,
tools?
I think absolutely right. You can adapt the Hansi matrix to add other things like deadlines, timelines, indicators, so you have the RASI doesn't go in those details. It's much more focused on who's responsible, what please consult and inform, and but you can add columns to that and you work on that. But one thing that you can also do is work with your team, because if I heard correctly in the question, I didn't read it, is that many of the team members are not actually reporting the tasks that they are doing. I don't know if I misunderstood that, but if that's happening, it's that because the tool is not working for them. So work with your team. Get the example of the issues log that I said that I was trying to use and that I love, it was not being used. What can I do to make my team use a tool that I see that is so important? What brought them together? Say, well, listen, we need a tool for defining responsibilities, defining tasks and deadlines, and to monitor that for us, not for the donor. Let's create that together. Let's adapt that together. So bring a participatory approach for the tool itself, adapting for their needs as well.
Thank you. I'm checking here, and like we have this question actually a couple of mentions. So AI has been evolving quickly, and we have to get to know how to make use of AI to make PM more efficient in all aspects. Are we thinking of how to integrate AI into our platforms, automatizing the available tools? And for example, someone asked for example, in a monitoring and evaluation report, like how, like to use the AI on that. So I want to hear any thoughts, Amanda, Edson, that you might have on this topic.
Amanda, you are a new expert. I'll leave that details for you. But what I would say is just to reinforce what I said before. Any tool, any platform, any mechanism, any technology is as good as the information you put there. So maybe you can use AI, for example, to summarize data that you've put there that would take a long time for you to do that manually or using an Excel spreadsheet or even a different platform. Maybe I would be able to get that data and give some summary to you that would be helpful. But how about how you define the indicators before? How do you establish those indicators and how actually you collect that data and to the AI? So yes, I think AI will help us a lot with looking at monitoring and evaluation specifically, but on aspects of project management to maybe do it more efficiently or maybe do that more quickly. But it will not do it for us. We will actually need to get a very good. It's not about a prompt. It's about the definition of indications, definition of plans, the data you collect and how you collect it and how you put it there, and then you get good results.
Um, so there's a couple challenges with technology, and one of the biggest challenges is that it moves faster than the ethics behind it. When it comes to using AI for monitoring and reporting, there are definitely some ways that we can use it, but I would like to just express some caution against using it for using any of the data that might contain beneficiary information or proprietary information when it comes to your organization or the donor. And so there's a lot of things that you don't want to do when it comes to AI. If you're using it to restructure the language of your reports or helping you to visualize some data, then definitely it is helpful. But you don't ever want to put any information into the AI that contains beneficiary identifiable information and anything that would be confidential or proprietary to your organization. So I would say, when it comes to monitoring and reporting, it really depends on what you're doing with the AI or what you're trying to use it for. And I would just caution when it comes to those aspects of it.
This is really important, Amanda, and I thank you for that reality check because I remember I work for two large organizations that are focused on children, and that was in another life, like 20 years ago. So there was no AI, but the concern at that time was: are we going to actually use online platforms that are not yet well developed and maybe not as secure as we want? Add the children's name in their data and their families. I remember that time that was a lot of mechanism that we created, and most of the information was not put online or shared online for those reasons. Nowadays, yes, there are more hackers that can go into it, but I suspect there are still like mechanisms only with platforms. Think about AI that it's been learning from our data, and maybe that data will end up in a place that we don't want to when you look at children, communities, organizations. So, Amanda, this is really important. And it will evolve rapidly. We will start using, software in our computer, and we start using platforms that we don't even know that there is an AI behind it. So ethical thinking and cautious is really, really important when you look at AI and the technology in general from now on.
And the debate of the AI and like the ethics and the use in our sector and in the project management is an ongoing discussion, and it's a discussion that will continue. As Amanda was saying, the technology like goes faster than some of the other protective systems in place. We have one last question that I would like to hear your expertise, both Edson and Amanda. So, how can a project continue long after the donor has left from the project manager perspective? Any thoughts on this?
Oh, good God.
Do you mean sustainability? Because technically a project ends when the funding ends and when it's closed out. So
I understood that wrong. I understood differently. So that if the donor suddenly leaves, not at the end of the project as planned, and that is different,
Suddenly.
right? I mean, suddenly. So this is about the project funding and donor participation ends before the end of it, like we've seen happening in the past year and a year and a half with many projects. We don't have funds anymore. We don't have donor anymore.
yeah.
I don't think there is a very easy answer, Amanda. You can share your experience because you've been managing some projects or following some projects that actually were hit, but this funding crisis that you have globally.
Yeah, there was, I mean, in that case, there's nothing you can do other than communicate proactively to the stakeholders to let them know what's going on and try to procure more funding. But other than that, there's just not a whole lot you can do. If it is a sustainability question, how can you keep a project going long after the donor is gone? I'm going to repeat what I said about the participatory. This is an intentional process. Sustainability has to be planned for. It needs to be specific. You have to be specific about what is being sustained, how and when. And it needs to be planned for. There are some great tools in the Project Pro that will help with sustainability planning, if that was what the question was about. But when it comes to just sudden funding pullouts, there's not much that you can do other than to maintain that stakeholder engagement and make sure that they know what's going on and why. Yeah.
And just building on what Amanda said about, the fund is over, we have to. What if only part of the funding is cut, not the entire funding from the project? So what Amanda said about participatory is really important because let's suppose that you have two funders and one just go away, and now you have half or part of your funding, which is not enough to implement the project. And now you have to understand, is it really worth continuing the project with that amount, or is it better to shift and change that for a different direction? And this is not about for the project manager deciding that. It's sitting down with the beneficiaries and I would say, well, listen, this has happened. Everybody would know. You have no full transparency and accountability, but also you decide with them what is the best approach for what happened. Maybe just pushing forward the project will actually create more expectations and more damage than just ending it up early and talking to the other donor and say, well, listen, we cannot continue. And maybe resume that in the future. We restart that project, we do it again. So participatory is the best approach to explain what's happening, what has to change, or simply to end the project.
Thank you, Amanda and Edson, for putting this question with the different scenarios. I think your expertise and your examples really give some good ideas for the attendees who asked this question. So this was our final question. A big thank you to Amanda, Edson, for sharing your expertise with us and for all those examples and all those insightful ideas. And thank you everyone for joining us today. If the attendees would like to continue building on these skills, we encourage you to explore our Project Deeper course. The next cohort starts on May 4th, and you will find a link in the chat. As you've heard today, with the updated shorter format, the course is delivered through live interacting sessions over 2 weeks and is designed to be practical, interactive, and immediately applicable to your work. We'll also be sharing the recording with all of you soon in the follow-up email, as we mentioned at the beginning. And if you would like to hear more about our free events, webinars like this one, you can sign up to our mailing list to stay up to date. The link is in the chat as well. Feel free to fill it out and you'll be in touch with all the next events from Humentum. Thanks again for being with us today. We hope to see you again soon. Thank you very much. Bye, everyone.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Annabella. Thank you, Amanda.
Thank you.